I kind of wanted to bring you up to speed on what's happening in Sudan. In the last couple of days, the Americans, they sent their SEAL Team 6 down there and some other special forces. Now, I'll read you the Biden's mandatory letter to Congress in a second, but I thought I'd play you this clip of Kirby. Listen to what he had to tell CNN.
I would just tell you that the universe of Americans, American citizens that have expressed a desire to leave and a willingness to move on short notice is a very small number, and so
it's far less
really
than the 16,000 estimated to be there, John.
Incredibly far less than that, much less than that.
Can you give me an estimate?
Again,
like
I think it's important to remember most of those 16,000 that you've seen, first of all, that's an estimate. Most of them are dual nationals. They grew up in Sudan. They got family members in Sudan that are not dual nationals and they don't want to leave. I'm hesitant to give you an exact number, but it's very small. It's in the many dozens of a kind of a number. Okay. And so because that population is so small, right now we're focused on making sure that they have access to information to get on these ground routes. Plus, some of our allies and partners, some of the ones you just mentioned, Kate, are willing to open up some seats on their planes for other foreign nationals, including Americans, and so we're providing that information to them as well. That may be another way to get out. But look, the ceasefire is working, but it's tenuous. We want to also be mindful of that.
You can see Mr. Kirby slightly uncomfortable because the special forces came to rescue the diplomats, and they left everybody. Well, I mean, whether they're dual national or not is kind of irrelevant, but they left everybody else behind. You know, the 16,000 Americans, give or take. Now, you know, when I first heard that figure, I was like, is that correct? 16,000? And then, you know, the estimates for this figure come from people who, as Kirby mentioned, are dual nationals, and then the rest of them are working, for example, in U.S.-funded aid organizations and so on and so on. So yeah, give or take. The number's kind of irrelevant here. But yeah, basically people are very angry with the State Department because they're not giving their own citizens much information. Never mind a ticket out of Sudan. Now, when Kirby says that most people don't want to go, I mean, I assume that's the case with most people to begin with, right? Of course, no one wants to be, chased away by violence and so on. Fine. But let me just show you what Biden did here, because there's this question about whether the Americans are kind of using this as an opportunity to, rescuing the diplomats as an opportunity to keep their troops there. I'm not so keen to say that's the case, but let's go through Biden's letter, because you guys know from 1973 and onwards, if he does send, if the president does decide to use American troops for whatever reason, he has to submit a letter to Congress within 48 hours, and then they can authorize that further or choose not to. So here's what Biden wrote to the Speaker of the House. He said that he used U.S. armed forces to conduct an operation to evacuate U.S. personnel from Khartoum, from Sudan's capital. They were deployed to Djibouti, to Ethiopia, and Sudan. Now, you should keep in mind, in Djibouti, they already have a huge base there to begin with. So, he's just putting that under the umbrella of this rescue operation. Now, for Sudan, some people are thinking, well, is this a good cover to slip in a few special forces squads? I mean, yeah, it certainly would be, hypothetically, but do you think the Biden administration were just kind of waiting around for some, diplomatic, some evacuation crisis of diplomats until they could do that? They don't care about these things, man. They really don't care. If they wanted to put people in Sudan, they would just put people in Sudan, and you wouldn't even know about it. I know this is the law he's supposed to tell them. Yeah, guess what? They don't abide by them. If you want to look at most of Africa, I mean, the way that this has been defined is kind of loosely, when we talk about military attachés, the threshold is quite low. It's 10 people. right? So if you took a map of Africa and you try to map out where the United States' bases and where they have military attaches and military personnel with 10 or more people, then it's most of Africa. It'll be 50 countries, right? Now, again, you have to keep in mind, these are the declared ones. So these are all of the ones that don't fall under classified or secret programs, okay? So the number could be and would be, my guess, much higher. Now, going back to Sudan, just so we're focused on Sudan, like I told you, the Americans, they already have an operation going on in Djibouti, which is just next door, which is in the Horn of Africa. You kind of know more or less what they've done in Somalia, because I've brought that up time and time again. They destroyed it. With Sudan, it's a different situation. I don't think you can compare it to Somalia. Somalia is really a different case. But when it comes to Sudan, I mean, you do have this situation where you have Dagalo on one side, and who was also called Hemeti, and he's, it's a power struggle with Burhan. That's really what the situation is. Now, who the Americans are backing, I think that's anybody's guess, because and the Israelis too. There's a big gold rush that's happening in Sudan, and I told you guys when I did my big breakdown video about Sudan and why this fighting is happening, is that one of the guys we're talking about, Hemeti or Dagalo, is a businessman. He's a businessman. Yes, he was close with the old president, with Bashir, and he headed these and still does head the RSF, the Rapid Strike Forces, but primarily, and at his roots, this guy is a hustler. He's went from farming to being a general and having his own private army. He has a lot of money, and there's lots of money to be made. So you're going to have other countries like Russia, like for example, the Israelis who are interested, let's say foreign parties, right, that are interested in making money from the gold mines, which are still, which are, like I told you, it's a gold rush. It's not over. And they're going to try and, whoever's easier to deal with, they're going to go with him. One thing I told you to keep in mind, when not in terms of business, but in terms of, geopolitics and the location of Sudan, which is, by definition, a very, very strategic, is the Red Sea base that both sides had said okay to 2 months ago. So if you look at it from that point of view, who stands to gain from this kind of mess? Well, yeah, I guess you could say it's the Americans and NATO and so on. I mean, look, whether they started it or didn't start it doesn't change the fact that they stand to gain from it, right? So just if you look at it from a point of view, from a question of who stands to gain, it's definitely them, because one of the key points of this agreement was that the Russians understood this, and both sides that are fighting in Sudan understood that the Russians can only get this base once there's a government formed. So now any fighting is going to cause a delay in a government being formed, and there's already been a delay of several years. And yeah, the Americans stand to gain from that. But just going back to this question of the troops that they've sent in. No, I don't think that this is some kind of plan by the Americans to smuggle in some troops. No, they can do that anytime they like, and this is just a standard evacuation operation, which you've seen them do in Lebanon in 2006. Or I guess the more recent one would not be 2006, but in Kabul in Afghanistan, with the helicopter coming on, landing on top of the embassy, the Chinook. And they did one also in Somalia, incidentally, because we were talking about Somalia. I think it was in 91, right? So yeah, they do these things all the time. I think in 1991, they even happened to be carrying the Soviet ambassador, back then Soviet, right? They're saying there's a ceasefire now. I mean, you guys remember the first couple of days, they tried doing 3 and 4 of them, and those ceasefires didn't hold. So again, I would say it's far from fixed for now, unfortunately, because at any moment's notice it can go back to fighting.